just like poll you guys what Bibles you read. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through the list. ESV.
Wait, are we only allowed to know one?
You can go go for all that you read.
Oh.
Right? So ESV we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Interesting. In a smaller group of people, we have more people reading ESV. NIV. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What is everyone? An ESV? 2. NLT? And KJV? Alright, cool. CEV? HTSV? ASV? Alright. ABC?
What the message?
Alright, it's a message right there.
Message is
Or
interesting.
double.
Double.
Jamaican.
I haven't seen that one. I've seen like a really colloquial one that says something like, I am the well-wicked shepherd. That was really funny, yeah.
Wasn't there one with like a Pittsburgh translation?
Oh,
Shit.
No way.
Yeah, so we'll wait for Christina to come back and then I'll start. Yeah, so I apologize if this is a little dry. I'm going to try to make it less by skipping the really dry parts. But yeah, please feel free to stop me, interrupt me, like disagree with me, comment, and ask questions, anything, okay? Right, so actually, why don't we just begin? Right, so I gave my introduction just now. We will be talking about history of Bible translations, but before that, we will be first talking about how we get the things that we base the Bible translation on, right? When you watch a Chinese movie, what's the original thing, right? The original thing is a script written in Chinese, right? And you translate, like the translators will translate that script to get the subtitles, right? When you read like the Hong Lou Meng, which is the red tower thing, or like Journey to the West, right? The original thing was in Chinese, right? And so we have the original thing somewhere, or a copy of the original thing, and we translated it and we read the story now. So in the same way, the Bible is translated from some original things, right? So, Christina,
Yes.
what is the Bible?
The Word of God.
Okay. What else do you know about the Bible? Can you tell us more about it?
Well, I'm pretty sure it's
Cool. Yeah, there are 66 books. Are they all written by the same person?
No, they're not. You don't even question.
What? No, I'm just fooling you.
Okay, they're all, most of them are written by different people, but they just have that overlap. All around a lot of them. So there's between the Old and the New. The Old Testament kind of talks about before Christ, from the creation of the world to somewhere before Christ. And then the New Testament talks about like Christ's life, and then kind of the inception of the church, and then the growth of the church. And all of these are inspired by God.
No, I think that's like a really good answer. You get 2 points.
Oh, thank you. I was not.
Sure. Yeah, have some candy.
No.
Right. So to motivate us on why we read the Bible, let's look at this verse in Hebrews 12. Right. So let's read together. What God has said isn't only alive and active. It is sharper than any double-edged sword. His word can cut through our spirits and souls and through our joints and marrow until it discovers the desires and thoughts of our hearts. Right? So the word of God, we believe, it is translation. I mean, it is written by human people, but we believe it's inspired by God. And it's not just like some old story. It's not like the Homer's Iliad. Right? It is living, and it can cut through spirits and souls and through our joints and marrow until it discovers the desires and thoughts of our hearts. Right? So, I think Christina basically got everything that I wanted to touch on the Bible. Right? It's a collection of books. It's in 3 languages. Right? The original was in 3 languages. So what are those 3? Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek. Cool. Yep. So my next question is, what is a biblical canon? Right? And just brace yourselves on some really lame pictures.
Oh my goodness.
Or just a Right? So jokes aside, what is the biblical canon? What is a biblical canon?
The 66.
Yeah. So it's basically a list of books that we affirm to be in the Bible, right? And why do I say a biblical canon? Because the biblical canon differs from whether you're Catholic, a Christian, to a Jew, right? The Catholics believe that the Apocrypha and some other books are part of the Bible, but the Protestants don't. Okay, so we need to affirm that this is a list of books that we think belong to the Bible, right? And why is this important? Well, okay, we'll talk about the canon first. So, 66 books in total, 39 books in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is based on the Jewish Tanakh, right, which is a very old book. The New Testament is more recent. It's new, but it's more of epistles, gospels, and revelation, right? And there should be teachings in circulation. The New Testament, the earliest list of the New Testament, right, all 27 books, was found around AD 367, right? And it's quite new. Okay, so why do you need to care about this? First of all, I want to talk about this thing called the Masoretic text, right? So if you read your Bibles, and sometimes in the Old Testament they say, right, this is not part of the MT, right? So MT is short form for Masoretic text, and this is what we base most of the Bible on, right? However, most of the Old Testament on. However, there's something interesting about this MT, right? The earliest copy of the MT that we have is dated to AD 925. So what's the problem here? It's really new, right? And what we have is a copy of a copy of a copy until like the first manuscript. And the earliest copy that we have is AD 925. So what would you think about that copy? Right? Along the way, it was transmitted, it was passed down. What are some problems you could think of?
Mistakes propagate.
Right, mistakes. Right. So how do we know that this MT is reliable? Okay, and the answer is we look to other things which are not so, I guess, reliable in some sense, but more reliable in another sense, right? For that we have the Septuagint, right? So the legend has it that King Ptolemy, in about 250 BC, he commissioned 72 scholars to translate the Hebrew Bible into Greek. And he put all 72 scholars in different rooms, and at the end of the day, they all came out and had the exact same translation, and it's called the Septuagint because of the 72 people, right? So I actually believe that's more of a legend, but it can actually be dated to about 250 BC, and it is the Old Testament translated into Greek. So why is this less reliable than the Masoretic text, which is Hebrew? Right? Why is this less reliable in one sense? Because it's a translation, right? If we translate because of on the translation, we propagate the mistakes of the translation. But in another sense, it's a little bit more reliable than this. So why is that? Right. So this was found in 250. This was dated in 250 BC. This is 925 AD. And you see that this is older. This would have less copying mistakes, right? And so what people do is they take this, and the parts of this they don't understand, they consult the Septuagint. Right? Make sense so far? The third thing that is key to the Old Testament is this thing called the Dead Sea Scrolls. Right? Have people heard of this before? Right? What are they?
Is it the artifacts that they found? Or like they found like written? I don't know. Did they find scrolls in jars?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so I meant.
Totally. So in 1947, apparently some goats ran off and they found these caves. Yeah, some goats.
Oh.
Like they ran off and like knocked some stones into a cave or something, and they found these caves near the Dead Sea. So the area near the Dead Sea is very dry, and these scrolls were in very good condition. They were preserved over the time, and this was discovered in 1947. So the fragments that we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls can be dated to as early as 400 BC, right? 400 BC, 250 BC, 925 AD. Right? The problem is that we only have fragments. We don't have the whole Hebrew Bible, the whole Hebrew Bible. We only have 40% of it. So this, at best, allows us to confirm that this is reliable. And research shows that 60% of this agrees with this, right? And whether there are deviations, like scholars debate and talk about it, but we won't get into that. Okay, so Old Testament for you. New Testament is a lot simpler. We have these things called codexes, and the earliest one we have is 4th century. And so I'll talk about a little bit about like the basis of some translations. This was only discovered, I think, last century or the century before, right? And that has an impact on like translations like the King James version. Okay, so yeah, so this is basically the complete New Testament in Greek, and it was found in it's dated to 4th century. Right now we use two versions, United Bible Society edition 4 and two dudes' names, which I can't pronounce. 27th edition, right? So these two, if you ever see these two, they are the Greek New Testament, and they are word for word the same, with different punctuation. Okay? With different punctuation, with different notes. Right, so the next thing I want to dive into is I call it the art of translation. And I want to begin with this thing. So this guy said, the Bible is the noblest monument of English prose. What is wrong about this sentence?
It's not English.
Right, it's not English. Right? He was actually talking about the King James Version translation. Okay. So the first question that I think you guys have seen, like, you watch anime and you see translations. You've seen some really bad Chinese translations of Star Wars, for example. What differentiates the two different kinds of translations? What do you think is in a good translation? Yeah.
Well, it's accurate, but also like accurate not in the sense of like word for word, but captures what it's trying to like be.
I know.
It captures a lot of the cultural references.
Okay.
Because sometimes, like, say, if you're watching an American show like The Simpsons, I don't know if they would get the same cultural references like in Europe, say, or in Asia. And sometimes it's really hard to take that into account.
I think that's a really good point, right? So Kelvin said it's just not just word for word, and Annie said it captures the culture, right? And that's basically it, right? So this Bible translator, whose name I pronounced, says there are three things required for a successful translation. You need to master the source language. You need to have really good interpretation skills and knowledge, and you need to write English really well, right? Why? Because you want to capture the cognitive and affective elements, right? Things that you can feel and understand out of a sentence that are not captured in the exact meanings of the words, right? So things like culture, things like emotion, sarcasm, intensity, all those things need to be conveyed across too. So Calvin, you mentioned accuracy. What is accuracy? Right, as an example, there's a Greek word called sarx, which is this. The dictionary translation of this is flesh. How many different ways in the Bible has? So this has been used like 67 times in the Bible. There are so many different ways that the word flesh has appeared, but they have different meanings, right? So what is accuracy? Given this example. Anyone want to try? All right, I'll just give you the book's answer. Okay, so accuracy, and you tell me whether you agree with this. Okay, an accurate translation communicates to today's readers or hearers the same meaning that the original author's text conveyed to his original readers or hearers. Right? Do you guys agree with this? Is this a good enough definition of accuracy? we have an understanding of what accuracy is, I have two things to say, right? No translation will be 100% accurate, but most modern versions are highly accurate and very trustworthy. Why is this the case?
Well, at least for the first part, it's like there are certain things that, certain concepts or things that just don't exist in another language. Like for example, like itadakimasu in Japanese, you can't translate that. You can just say it's something people say before they eat,
Right.
but it like that doesn't actually capture what it is.
Yes. Yeah. I think you're totally right. There are just some things, whether it's a lost context, right? We can't go back 2,500 years and figure out what they were doing then, or just some part of the language that we just cannot capture in English, right? Of course, vice versa. There's something in English you cannot capture in other languages, but this applies to any language. Why is it that we can all read the Bible and claim we are Christians and claim we are following, the right thing right now? What gives us the confidence of the Bibles that we all have and read, right? So you guys like the breakdown, right? What makes you so sure that your version is reliable? And I'll say that it is, right? But why? So it's a very simple answer, right? A lot of money, time, intelligence, effort has been poured into those translations. You have committees who cross-check each other. You have scholars who have spent years trying to understand the Hebrew in the Bible, and you get the best of the best minds, and you put them together and you construct a team, and you have checks and balances in place to make sure that biases and mistakes get corrected out. The product are the Bibles that we see today, right? Now that's very different from how it was 400 years ago, or even 600 years ago. Okay? People back then, most of the time did a translation by themselves, right? Martin Luther did his own German translation by himself, right? So did Tyndale. But today we have not just by one person, but by teams, right? So we have like more checking, more guarantees, and therefore more reliable Bibles. Okay? So as an example, I'm going to say this. As an example, let's look at Psalms 23, right? So we talked about loss of context. We talked about the inability to convey like the original language. So let's read Psalms 23 in the original King James Version, right? So let's read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yet, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Right? Have you guys memorized this to some degree? Are you guys familiar with this? This rings like resonates with you, right? If you open most of these Bibles today, you will see some permutation of. It'll be very close to this, right? And if you don't believe me, you can like check it out. But this is the King James Version, right? And this was written 400 years ago. So there are some issues with it that, not issues, but like I just want you to think about these things. In the original, like 400 years ago, when you read "I shall not want," you would understand that there is something that you need. Right now, if you read "I shall not want," you might be inclined to understand that you are devoid of desire, right? But the actual meaning is there is nothing I left. Can you guys see that? Secondly, the idea of a green pasture is not so strong to us. We prefer words like lush. Thirdly, paths of righteousness is kind of a liberty taken by the committee that translated the King James Bible. The closer and more accurate translation would be the right paths. Because the psalm is about you are a sheep, God is your shepherd. He's leading you not paths of righteousness, but down the correct paths. Right? So you won't get lost. So you will never stray from the path. Valley of the shadow of death sounds really powerful, right? It sounds like impactful, but actually the Hebrew Hebrew is much closer to just duck belly. And finally, forever, like the original Hebrew is closer to my whole life long, meaning for as long as I live. Okay? Does this mean that the King James Version is wrong? In some parts could be. This could be like a mistranslation. But the sense of it is that sometimes when you understand, like for a contemporary reader, they may not understand some of the expressions here. They may misunderstand it, and that could be dangerous. Okay? On the other hand, the King James Version resonates so strongly with us, right? That's why we still have it. That's why it's still so popular, and that's why it still forms the basis of so many Bibles that we read today. Okay, so just consider this, right? That the King James Version has both its strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so why do we need good translations? Right, the simple answer is we want to access God's Word. God's Word is not written in English, it's written in Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. Right? So when we translate, when Bible translators translate, we have some difficulties. And I'm just going to briefly like just go through some of them. Right, so the first is textual criticism. The second is this difference, this spectrum that I'm going to talk about, and third is style. Okay. So textual criticism is when mistakes are made, what do you do with them? Right? If you're copying someone's like math homework and you see he makes a mistake, what do you do about it? Do you just copy straight off? Do you fix it? Right? So here are some problems that could happen. Right? First is lithography, where you repeat something unintentionally. The next is haplography, when you miss out something that you should have repeated. Right? So what is this sentence actually? The assassin, right? You miss out something that you should have repeated, but you read a different word with a completely different meaning, right? Okay, so these things would happen when you copy, when you transmit the text. The other one is when you mistake one letter for another. But you could be like, John, you know, the English alphabet, all 26 letters look so different to me. Chinese looks so different to me. Well, what about the Hebrew alphabet, which is where we get the Old Testament from? I want you to draw your attention to two alphabets. Right? One is the Dalet and one is Resh. Okay, so can you see how similar they are and why it could be easy for someone who is copying to make a mistake? Okay, so it could totally happen. Another difficulty we face is words that we don't see ever. Like, we just see it once in the Hebrew and we don't know what it means, right? So there's some ways we can get around that, but I'm not going to go over the ways. Sometimes people who copy, they add their notes, they paraphrase instead of copying. So then, you know, whenever you paraphrase, you add in interpretation, which is what you don't want. Well then, what do? Right? You consult other languages. This is how you find words that you've never seen before. You cross-reference with other documents and you add footnotes. You be honest, right? A good translation will be honest when they are not sure about the meaning of the word. And you're going to see that a lot in the minor prophets. If you look at your footnotes, they'll say like unsure, like original meaning unsure, something like that. So the second thing I want to talk about, which is arguably more interesting, is this spectrum, right? And this is basically the spectrum, right? On the left side, you have this idea that translations should be word for word, right? And on the right side, you have translations which are thought for thought. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the common Bibles that we read today. NASB, super literal. Sometimes a little bit too literal for people to understand, right? How about ESV? ESV is also pretty literal. King James is also pretty literal. And then you start to move towards the middle of the spectrum, right? You have the NIV. And NIV is a balance. The NLT is more free. And then on the far right is the Message. Okay? So can you get the sense of like what this spectrum is? It's two ends, right? The first end is called formal equivalence, where the emphasis is on maintaining the translations of the Hebrew word, right? So if I see socks, I'm not going to put like sin or sinfulness or like physical body, I'm just going to put flesh, right? The interpretation is left up to the reader, and they will need to depend on context, right? Secondly, I'm not going to change the word order, and I'm not going to make the sentences shorter, which is why the NASB and the ESV sometimes have very long sentences that are hard to digest. You need to read them and reread them, and that's because the Greek sentences are very long. Right? The other end is what we call functional equivalence, where we try to capture the meaning of the word, of the sentence, right? And the motivation behind that is to produce sentences which read naturally in today's English, right? So you could break up the sentence, you could use different word orders. As an example, let's look at a couple of verses from NASB and NLT, right? So I'm not going to read because it's really long, but it's from Ephesians 1, verses 3 to 8. Okay, so we see some differences. NASB, 3 periods, right? 3 sentences in the Greek, 3 sentences in NASB. We use words like blessed, foundation of the world, predestined, bestowed, forgiveness, trespasses, lavished. The NLT breaks the whole chunk into 7 sentences, right? And uses words like all praise to, made the world, decided in advance, poured out, forgave of sins, showered. Can you begin to see the difference between the two ends of the spectrum? Right? So, very briefly, what are some advantages and disadvantages? You want to volunteer? Well, first of all, to someone who maybe isn't so strong in English, right? Today we have a lot of people who are, English is becoming very popular, but we have a lot of people who have English as a second or third language, right? The NLT might be easier for them to understand. However, to a well-studied Christian, right, someone who has read a lot of the Bible, these words carry special meaning for us. Predestined, foundation of the world, forgiveness of trespasses. These words are more heavy. These words they resonate deeper with us, right? So it's not to say that you should prefer one or the other. I think both have their advantages. I think a wise Christian would always try to get both, right? To get the best out of both. Okay. So in this spectrum, we see a lot of Bibles, right? We see the Bibles laid out, and they all have different levels of being functional, being form-driven or meaning-driven. So here's some things to think about. First is called Biblish, Bible English, right? If you look at the rendition of Psalms 1 in the ESV, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. What about the woman? And who speaks like this except Yoda? And when you stand in the way of sinners, you're blocking them, right? So isn't that a good thing? And what's a scoffer? So these are like expressions that we are familiar with, right? That's why I call them Bible English. They don't actually be misinterpreted today. So the CEV renders this using much simpler English. Okay, so another thing to think about is that Bibles are sometimes read, as in like you just read them, and they're sometimes read aloud, right? And translations could take this into account, right? Because when you read, you could jump back and walk to before. When you listen, you have one shot at listening. You can't like raise your hand. I guess you could, but it would be awkward to raise your hand and ask your pastor to repeat what he just read. Okay, so skip this. A lot of the Psalms are written in their very poetic nature, and when you try to take away the poetry and try to translate that into some contemporary English, you lose the poetic nature, right? The other thing that's very interesting would be figures of speech, right? So can someone with ESV Bible read Psalms 147, verse 10, in a loud, clear voice? I have an ESV up front too, the purple Bible.
Race. Oh, what's a race?
Okay, can you read it out in a loud, clear voice?
delight is not in the strength of the horse, nor his pleasure in the legs of a man.
Okay, so I guess it's a good thing for men because then we don't need to shave our legs.
What?
Can you repeat that again?
His delight is not in the strength of the horse, nor his pleasure in the legs of a man.
Oh. Wait,
What?
maybe she doesn't shave? No.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I'm glad God doesn't care about my legs because they're ugly.
Oh.
But that's okay. So that was a wrong interpretation, right?
Okay.
Strength of a horse, legs of a man. Legs of a man doesn't mean that God looks at man's legs and how well he takes care of them. It's a figure of speech, right? It's another way of saying how strong a man is, right? So God is saying that He doesn't take pleasure in how strong a horse is or how strong a man is, right? And so you have different levels, right? A more literal translation will keep those words like ESV, right? And someone who reads that could be like, wow, that's actually very funny. Maybe I should shave. But a more like meaning-driven translation would take the figure of speech and put that into contemporary English. Okay? We also have ambiguous words like love of God, is it love to God, from God to like people in general, right? So the last thing that I want to talk about is style. Well, before like I move on, right? So the fact is that the truth is that style is the one thing that will change, that will affect whether or not we like the translation, right? And so style has these factors. Okay, so I've talked about some of these things. We obviously go back to translations that we are more familiar with, right? In particular, translations that stand in the Tyndale KJV tradition tend to be more familiar, right? Other translations grew up in different groups of people, right? Not all Christians are Asian, not all Christians grew up in like a well-to-do place. People speak differently. You could introduce colloquialisms, although there could be problems with that, right? Some people could prefer red letter. Some people could prefer like headings on the paragraphs in the Bible. Some people prefer not to have headings, right? So style is a big thing, right? So I want to use the remaining time to briefly go over a history of Bible translations. We've understood a lot of things. We've understood how we transmit Greek manuscripts. We understood how translation is very difficult, and there are different things to think about. So the last part, I just want you to treat it as like a story. Okay? And this story is an explanation for why there are so many different translations today, and why some of them are more popular. Right? So in the year 1517, what happened? Martin Luther, he nailed his, what did he nail? Yes, how many? He nailed his 95 theses, right? And what did that spark? Right. And what is the Reformation in like generally speaking? It's basically moving against the Catholic control of the Bible, is moving against the Catholic control of Christianity, right? And what happened after this was that he translated the Bible, the New Testament, into German. And so right after him came this guy that is arguably the most famous character in all of Bible translation history. And his name is William Tyndale. Right, so what William Tyndale did was that he saw that Martin Luther had translated the New Testament into German. He wanted to do the same thing for English. Right? He didn't believe that, he believed that the common people should be able to read the Bible in common English. And that's exactly what he did. Right? After him, and so the other reason why he is so important is because he is the one that first penned words like these. I'm pretty sure some of you find these words very familiar, right? Well, they were created by Tyndale 500 years ago. Okay, so we owe this guy a lot for what we get in English translations. After him, there came the Geneva Bible. So what's so special about the Geneva Bible? Right, it's the first Bible with verse numberings. And what does it tell us about verse numberings? us that verse numberings are not inspired. Okay, so verse numberings were added by humans, right? And so sometimes if you disagree with the verse numbering, that's totally fine. But this is significant because this is the first time that we can actually cross-reference the Bible. We can look up an exact point in the Bible with accuracy. Okay. So after this, there was a guy, and his name was James VI of Scotland. And what happened was that he became the King of England, right? And so his name was King James I. And what did King James do? He made a Bible translation, right? This translation was the first translation to use committee, right? So there were like six panels, and they produced what is known as the King James Bible. At that time, it was also called the Authorized Version, right? Because it was authorized by the King of England, right? And this was in 1611, right? The King James Bible was heavily influenced by Tyndale, right? Research shows that 84% of the New Testament and 75% of the Old Testament of the King James Bible came from William Tyndale's Bible. Okay, so this guy, right? So the King James Bible came. It became immensely popular. It affected people. People read it. People loved it. And so for about 400 years, 300 years, it remained the single most popular Bible in English Bible. Okay, it was sold the most. People read it the most. And in 1885, they decided that there should be a revision, right? Why is there a revision needed? They released what is called the Revised Version, and basically it uses a different Greek manuscript that the King James Version was based on, right? So the King James Version was based on a manuscript which many consider today to be not as reliable as what we have, right? Remember the two I told you, UPS-4 and NE37, right? So I'm not sure which exactly the RV used, but it was revised to be based off a manuscript which was more reliable. There wasn't a lot of changes, so the RV kept the nature of King James Version. Alongside the RV came the ASV. The ASV is essentially the RV, but printed in America, right? Which is why it's called the American Standard Version. Okay, so the ASV and the RV are basically almost the same. After that, in the year 1952, people came together and decided, okay, we need another revision, right? Let's call this the RSV, the Revised Standard Version. Now, this translation is important because of the controversy it created, right? If you look at Isaiah 7:14, it reads a young, in the King James Version, in the RV, it reads a young virgin will conceive, right? In the RSV, it reads a young woman shall conceive. Why is that the case? The case is because in Matthew, he was quoting the Septuagint, right? And Septuagint used a Greek word that had the meaning of virgin, like the word was parthenos. It had the meaning of virgin attached to it, right? And so if you use the King James Version, it will say in the Old Testament virgin. However, in the Hebrew, the word that was used just means young woman, which is why RSV decided to do away with virgin and just use young woman. Because of this, people opposed it. People thought it was from the devil. There was a warning that appeared in the U.S. Air Force manual that said, "Don't touch this. It came from the communists." Right? So people hated it. Well, some people hated it, right? And so other groups of people who were less, like I guess, progressive, they came to the committee, they made this and said, "Yo, can you make some changes to it, right? Just a couple of changes, and it will be more evangelical. It will be more accepted." The committee behind the RSV said no, right? And because they said no, that led to the translation of what we know as the NASB. response to the RSV, right? Because the RSV was so controversial, people decided, all right, we're going to make an NASB. And the fact is that, yes, the NASB was better in the sense that it was more popular. By 1977, it was the most sold Bible in the United States. But this changed in 1978. So what do you think came out in 1978? The NIV. Right, in 1978, the NIV was created. The NIV was created because they needed two things. They needed a Bible which was not so controversial like the RSV. They also needed a Bible which was more evangelistic, right? Which is why you kind of see the NIV in the middle of the spectrum, right? The NIV was released and it shot, like, it just broke all the records. People went out and bought it. It was crazy. And a lot of people still read it today, right? There's still a significant number of people reading the NIV. Yeah. The NIV was not based, so the NIV is one of the first Bibles, which, if you look at this long chart, is not based on any of the Bibles here, right? Which is why the NIV reads a little differently from, say, something along this line. Okay, but the NIV still keeps a lot of the, like if you read Psalms 23 from the NIV, it still sounds very similar. At some point, the NIV kind of like created trouble for itself by deciding to create this version called the NIV inclusive. So, do you know what the inclusive language means? Inclusive language basically means if you see a gender-specific noun in the Bible, make it applicable to both man and woman, right? So, my son becomes my child. The inner man becomes inner being, right? So these are inclusive languages so that we don't exclude like male, female, our female counterparts, right? People will debate about this. People will argue about this. I think it's not correct, but that's what the NIV did. We created this thing called the NIVI, right? And people hated it, right? There was a lot of controversy around it, like the RSV. So in response to this, what happened? What? Right. So a group of people came together in Colorado Springs and they decided, okay, we're going to have some guidelines on how to translate gender generic nouns, right? And from out of that came the guidelines which would drive what we now know today as the ESV. The ESV is pretty much a revision of the RSV, right? It took away, it put back all the things that RSV did wrong, that made it controversial, and it also was not gender inclusive like the NIVI. It's a little gender inclusive, but not as controversial, right? And so that's where we get the ESV, right? So we got the NASB here, we got the ESV here, and the NIV. There was a guy called Kenneth Taylor. He had 10 children, and he would read the Bible to his children every night. However, he found that his children could not understand the Bible because he was reading them in ESV. So, on his way to work, he would paraphrase parts of the Bible, and eventually he released what is called the Living Bible. Right? And this Living Bible is a paraphrase. It's not very accurate. It's on the far right of the spectrum. Of this in the NLT. Right? So the NLT was released in 1994 as an actual translation. Okay. So I think I pretty much covered all the translations that we talked about. Oh, and I'm running out of time. Yes. HCSB?
Where does it come from?
It's its own translation.
It's like
It's like the NIV. It's just on its own. Yeah. It was funded by the Southern Baptist Convention, and so it's very popular in the South. But it is one of the newest translations, which was released in 2004. Yeah. Yes.
So why do you
think it's a good balance between. So I don't like the ESV. I read the ESV and I get really frustrated because I don't get it. And when I read the NIV, it's too close to the King James translation. So I picked something that was here. I picked something like kind of in the middle. But I read it, I liked it, I like its accuracy, I like its dedication to like try to make it uses this thing called optimal equivalence where everything is first formal and then when it doesn't make sense, use like functional. Right? So it's like it shows progress in translation. Okay, so that's all that I want to cover. I know I'm probably really late. But as some closing words. As some closing words, I think it's important to know what Bible you have. I think it's important to know like how the translation came about, why you can be confident that it's reliable. But I think above all of that, the most important thing is for you to do is to read the Bible. Right? Find one that you like. Find one that speaks to you, and just read it. Like read it inside out, cover to cover. All right. So that's it for me. Thanks. And any questions? You can guys can clap. Any questions?
You would recommend NLT to people who are not familiar with English Bible?
Yeah. Which is why I gave Steph an NLT. And today she read from the NLT. I believe. NLT is actually my first Bible too. No. The Good News Bible is my first Bible. So I have the 1994 NLT here. And Grace has the updated version. I also have the ESV, the Message, and the Japanese. But it contains the NKJV too. And I also have the ACF. I don't use all of them. I mostly use HCSB for most of my stuff. All right, cool. Have some more candy.